Hello everyone, welcome to this educational channel on Form 4 and Form 5 biology. Let's study biology together. My name is Janet and I'm an experienced biology teacher. I'll be teaching you with clarity and help build your creativity and critical thinking skills. To receive notification of new biology videos, please click the subscribe button below to subscribe. Share, like, comment and subscribe. Thank you. We'll be studying Form 5 Biology, Chapter 2, Locomotion and Support. Subtopic 2.1, Muscles, Tendons, Ligaments, Cartilage and Joints. There'll be 2 hot questions with model answers. The learning outcomes or objectives for this video are: firstly, we must be able to label the muscles, tendons, ligaments, and bones in a picture of an arm. Secondly, explain how movement is brought about in a limb. Thirdly, state the functions and adaptations of tendons and ligaments. And fourthly, state functions of cartilage, synovial fluid, synovial membrane, and capsule at a joint. We will begin by discussing the first tissue, which is the skeletal muscles. Skeletal muscles are a type of muscles that are different from the cardiac muscles and the smooth muscles. Cardiac muscles are found in the heart, whereas smooth muscles are found in the wall of the hollow organs. For skeletal muscles, they are the muscles that are attached to the skeleton or the bones, and they also cause movement to occur when they contract. Let's look at the structure of skeletal muscles. They are made up of bundles of muscle fibers attached to the bones to produce movement. So these are the muscle fibers, which are grouped together to form bundles. The nuclei are on the external surface here, and there are striations or stripes on the muscles. So when these muscles attached to the bones contract, they will produce movement. Now the function of these skeletal muscles is that when they are stimulated by nerve impulses, they will contract using energy from ATP. So the cells of the muscles are full of ATP and full of mitochondria to produce the ATP through cellular respiration. So when they contract using the energy from ATP, they will pull the bones and movement of the body occurs. What is the adaptation of muscle cells for their function? So the adaptation of muscle cells is that they contain a lot of mitochondria, as seen here, to provide energy or ATP through cellular respiration for muscle contraction. So this is a mitochondria, an organelle that carries out cellular respiration and provides the energy, which is in the form of ATP for muscle contraction. So for mitochondria, it has the inner membrane that is folded. Okay? So you must know the structure of the mitochondria and know how to draw it. And remember that the muscle cells have a lot of this mitochondria in them. Okay, the characteristic of skeletal muscles are that they are voluntary muscles, meaning that they are controlled by the conscious thought or will. A question that can be asked is, why do muscles work in pairs, called antagonistic muscle pairs? The reason is because muscles can only contract, they become shorter to pull the bones, but they cannot expand. They just go back to their original length and they cannot expand beyond the original length to push the bones. Let me give you an example. Let's say a muscle is 4 cm at rest. So when it contracts, it becomes 2 cm, let's say. Okay? But after that, it will just relax back to its original length, which is 4 cm. It cannot push the bones by extending the muscle to 6 cm, let's say. Okay, so when they relax, they just go back to their original length, and they won't pull the bones. Thus, two muscles must be used, one to move a bone to a position and one more to pull it back again to its original position. So muscles work in pairs. And the meaning of the word antagonistic muscles is a pair of muscles that work in opposite ways to one another. When one muscle contracts, the other must relax. Let's discuss how movement is brought about in the arm. So movement of an arm is caused by the contraction and relaxation of a pair of antagonistic muscles, that is, the biceps in the front and the triceps at the back. Okay, so the mention of antagonistic muscle pairs, or using this term, is very important for this question, and that will help you to obtain 1 mark. So we must mention how these antagonistic muscle pairs work. When biceps contracts, triceps will relax. And then the biceps will transmit the pulling force to the tendon, and tendon will pull the bone, which is the radius. But as the radius is pulled up, ulna will follow suit. Okay, so this pulls up the radius, the contraction of the muscles cause the radius to be pulled up, and the arm is bent at the elbow here. On the other hand, when triceps muscle contracts, it's not shown here, but when it contracts, it should become a bit fatter, right? So when triceps muscle contracts, biceps muscle relaxes. Mention what happens to the two muscles. Then what happens to the bones? So the radius and ulna are straightened. Actually, it's the ulna first that's pulled down, and the radius will come down with it. So the arm is straightened. To get 4 marks, you can see here the allocation of marks. Antagonistic muscles are biceps and triceps, 1 mark. Biceps muscle contracts, the arm is bent at elbow, and for extra marks, the radius and ulna are pulled up. Tricep contracts, this is the second stage, is to straighten the arm. Okay, biceps muscle relaxes, radius and ulna pulled downwards this time, and the arm is straightened. Thus, in this diagram, we can see the straightening of the arm, which was not shown in the earlier slide. When the arm straightens, the triceps will contract first, and you have to draw the triceps muscle thicker than the biceps, okay, when it contracts. And the triceps will pull the ulna downwards, okay, and it also has a tendon here to transmit the pulling force to the bone. Let us look at the various parts of the arm and the tissues involved. This is a side view of the arm, showing the scapula, okay, and then this bone is the humerus. And these two bones here, the first one below is the ulna, which forms the elbow joint with the humerus, and the radius is above it, but also attached together with it. Okay, then for biceps, it has 2 tendons at the top. That's why it's called biceps. 2 tendons of origin. Please make sure that if you are asked to draw the biceps in a diagram, please make sure that the 2 tendons are attached to the scapula, not to the humerus. Then below, on the other hand, you have the tendons attached to the radius. Okay, for biceps. But for triceps, it's different. Tri means 3, so it has 3 tendons of origin. 2 are attached to the humerus, and one is attached to the scapula. Okay, so you have to memorize this. For biceps, 2 tendons attached to scapula. For triceps, 2 tendons attached to humerus and 1 to scapula. Okay, and then going down here, you see there's one more tendon here to connect the triceps to the ulna, especially for straightening the arm. They will pull the ulna downwards. That's the job of the triceps, which is connected to the ulna through the tendon below. Here also you see the ligaments attached to the bone, ligaments attached bone to bone here. There are 2 shown here. Right, so this picture shows the ligaments, tendons, the muscles, and the bones involved. Now let's discuss some of the tissues that are seen in the structure of the arm, and that is the tendon and the ligaments. Tendons, what are the characteristics? They are tough or strong and inelastic. They are a type of connective tissue which are tough and inelastic. And the function is to attach the muscles to the bones and thus transmit the pulling force of the muscle. When the muscle contracts, it will pull the tendon, and the tendon will transmit the pulling force of the muscle to the bone, for example, to the radius, in order to pull it up. Okay, so why are they inelastic? It's because they must be able to transmit the pulling force of the muscle to the bone. That's why they are inelastic. Okay, if they are elastic, they will just stretch when the muscle pulls them, and there will be very little effect on the radius, no pulling force. So tendons are inelastic, strong and inelastic, or tough and inelastic. But ligaments, they are also tough or strong, but elastic. So elastic means it's like a rubber band, can stretch, and that is to allow the bones to move while it is connecting bones together. So the function of the ligament is to connect bone to bone, or attach, cause the bones to be attached together, and also to prevent dislocation of bones, meaning prevent the bones from coming out of their positions, especially due to some stress or trauma or some falls. So although they prevent dislocation, they still allow movement of the bones. Here is a useful table to help you remember what we discussed just now. The tissue is stated together with its characteristics or adaptations and the function. So a common question in the SPM is to ask you the adaptations of tendons or ligaments or even cartilage, right? So if you're asked to give adaptations, first you give the characteristic, tough or strong and inelastic, and then you must mention for what purpose. All right, so to attach muscles to bones, for example. They are tough and inelastic to attach muscles to bones and to transmit the pulling force of the muscle to the bone. Okay, so just connect the characteristics with the function. Same for ligament. If you're asked to give the adaptations, you can say a ligament is tough and elastic to connect bone to bone and hold the bones together at a joint. Thus, they prevent dislocation of bones, yet allow movement of bones to occur. Now, for cartilage, which we haven't discussed. So cartilage is found in the nose area or the ears, or even in the sternum, where the ribs are found, where the rib cage is found. So they are tough, flexible. They are flexible. You can just check with your ear. It's a flexible piece of tissue, right? And flexible or elastic connective tissue. Okay, tendon, ligament, and cartilage are all connective tissue. And they are not so rigid like bone, they are softer than bone. Okay, as we can feel from the ear and the nose areas. Right, function to reduce friction between the bones. That's because it is smooth and flexible. And it absorbs shock also, because it's softer than bone. So it absorbs shock at the joint, especially at your knee joint. Okay, and it protects the bone from damage during movement. Let's look at the structure of a joint. A joint is a place where two or more bones meet. So there are three types of joints, such as the immovable joint, the partially movable joint, and then the movable joint. So we're going to discuss the movable joint, which allows movement in either all directions or in one plane. And this includes the ball and socket joint and the hinge joint. So these two joints, ball and socket joint and hinge joint, is also called the synovial joint because it has synovial fluid in between the bones. Okay, we'll discuss this later about the function of synovial fluid. So let's start to discuss the function of the parts of the movable joint, but by discussing from the outside to the inside. All right. So the whole joint is enveloped and protected by the capsule, which is a tough membrane that surrounds the joint. Then on the inner part of the capsule, there's a second layer called the synovial membrane. This membrane secretes a fluid called the synovial fluid, which helps to reduce friction between the bones during the movement of the bones. Synovial fluid also nourishes the cartilage at the bone ends. So this blue part here is the cartilage, and it gets the nutrients from the synovial fluid. So what is the function of cartilage? The cartilage is found at the bone ends, especially to reduce friction also between the bones. So it has one common function with the synovial fluid to reduce the friction between the bones, especially when the bones move. And secondly, it's a bit softer than bone, so it absorbs shock and protects the bone from damage during movement, especially when a person jumps up and down. Some of the shock is absorbed by the cartilage. Now, if you have not seen cartilage before, I advise you to buy a chicken drumstick and eat until you have the drumstick in hand, and you will see that there is a whitish tissue at the bone ends. Okay, that is the cartilage. Now, apart from that, we have the ligament, which connects the bone to bone. So this tissue, as we have learned, is tough and elastic or inelastic? Yes, it is elastic to allow some movement at the joint. Here is a table that records all the points that we have discussed just now. Okay, so parts of a joint and the characteristics of function. So let's go through it very quickly. A capsule is an envelope that surrounds the joint. It is a tough membrane that protects the joint. Synovial membrane secretes synovial fluid. Synovial fluid lubricates the joint, reduces friction between the bones during movement, and nourishes the cartilage at the bone ends. Cartilage reduces friction between bones when bones move and absorbs shock. It protects the bone from damage during movement. When it comes to the types of joints in our body, there are two types of joints that you need to know. Very important, and it's a common SPM question. The hinge joint and the ball and socket joint. Hinge joint allows movement in one plane only. You'll see how it moves afterwards. Example is at the elbow, between the humerus and radius ulna, and at the knee joint. The ball and socket joint allows movement in all directions and is found at the shoulder joint, between humerus and scapula, and the hip joint. So let's see where all these parts are. Let's discuss the difference between the hinge joint and the ball and socket joint. The hinge joint allows movement in only one plane, but the ball and socket joint allows movement in all directions or all planes. Take for example the elbow joint for hinge joint. So the elbow joint is between the humerus and the radius and ulna here. If you fix the shoulder joint so that it does not move at the top, and you try to move your radius or ulna, that means the lower arm, you'll find that it can either go up or down only. That means the movement is in the vertical plane, only one plane. Okay, so you need to fix the shoulder joint so that there's no movement, or else it will affect the movement here. So for the other joint, the ball and socket joint, the humerus has a ball-shaped head, like a ball, and it fits into the socket of the scapula. And this allows movement that occurs in all directions, can occur in all directions or all planes. For example, the humerus or the upper arm can move to the right, our right, and to the left, and to the front, and also there can be some rotational movement of the humerus. So there's more freedom in the movement here for ball and socket joint than for hinge joint. Let's look at this runner here and see where we can find the two types of joints, the hinge joint and the ball and socket joint. First, the hinge joint. Hinge joint can be found at the elbow and the knee. Okay, so sometimes you may be asked to circle the part that has the joint, like the hinge joint, with your pen in the diagram. So if you need to circle, then you circle the hinge joints at the elbow or the knee. The second thing we need to know is what are the bones at each joint. Now, for the hinge joint at the elbow, think about the bones. The bone in the upper arm here is called the humerus, right? And these two bones for the lower arm are the radius at the top and ulna at the bottom. Okay, so humerus, radius, ulna. And then for the knee, what are the bones at the knee? This bone here, the hip bone, is the femur, and it forms a joint with the bone in the lower leg here called the tibia. Okay, femur and tibia. Right, so these are the two hinge joints that allows movement in one plane. Let's look at the ball and socket joint here. They are found at the shoulder and the hip. Okay, so at the shoulder, you have the flat triangular piece of bone called the scapula at the back. It has a socket or a part that is a bit concave, depressed. And the other bone is this one, which has a ball, a head that is shaped like a ball, okay, that fits into the socket of the scapula. So this bone is the humerus. Humerus and scapula forms the ball and socket joint at the shoulder. Then at the hip, we have this flat bone here that's called the pelvic girdle. It forms a ball and socket joint with your, what is this bone here? Femur. Okay, with the femur. Pelvic girdle and femur. Right, so sometimes you are asked to label a ball and socket joint, then you label the ball and socket joint at the shoulder, or if it's present, then you can label the one at the hip. Here is a good mnemonic for you to use for essay questions like the one that we just discussed, where you have to know the 5 tissues involved in support and locomotion and one structure, that's the joint. Boney just misses tender loving care. Boney may be a cat who was lost and then was found again. BON for bone, J for joints, M for muscle, TEND for tendon, L for ligament, and CAR for cartilage. Let's discuss a HOTS question on this chapter. This chapter can have many HOTS questions, so I'll just pick up one related to sprains. Amy sprained her ankle while playing netball. Explain what happened to her body tissues. That means, what is a sprain, right? So you can answer in this way. She may have a torn ligament. The ligament has been injured in the ankle joint. All right, this from the top view, you can see it's a bulging out, caused by stress and trauma to the joint, to the ankle joint, when she was running very fast or turning her body. The ligament that connects bone to bone is injured. So state the function of the ligament, but it is injured. And this causes swelling and pain and swelling at the joint. So notice that we mentioned the symptoms of the sprain, right? Which you can add into this type of answer. So if you look at the answer carefully, it's all about cause and effect. She has a torn ligament. The cause was the stress and trauma, leading to a torn ligament and also pain and swelling. Now there's a second question here. Explain 2 steps that can be taken to treat a sprain at home. So there are actually 4 steps according to the acronym RICE, RICE. But we are going to discuss only 2. So E is for elevate. So a person can elevate or lift up his foot above his heart like this. That means he must lie down on a chair or in bed, more comfortable in bed, and then he elevates his foot above the heart. So he's lying flat, but the foot is higher up, right? This is to eliminate excess fluid. So whatever fluid accumulates here due to the inflammation of the ankle, it will not stay there because it will move down back to the heart due to the position of the leg. So this will reduce swelling. Okay, so this leg must be propped up using a cushion or a pillow. Now a second step that I can take is he can rest the injured ankle and don't put any weight on it, and avoid physical activities for the time being, active physical activities or sports. This is to allow the ligament time to heal. So the person who has a sprain should not go and try to play games. I think it will be very painful for him. Allow the ligament to heal by taking care that you do not put too much pressure on it, on the ankle. Based on an analysis of past years' questions on this topic, the following points can be noted. Firstly, tendons, ligaments, cartilage, muscles, and joints. They are all popular examination questions, especially for the structured and objective section. So that's why we have to study them here. Understand and memorize their characteristics, adaptations, and functions of all these tissues. For adaptations, always state the characteristics followed by the function for that characteristics. So there are lots of HOTS questions on these tissues, so try more HOTS questions and read widely about these topics. For example, you can read about the types of diseases related to these topics and what is the treatment for them. That's all for this video. In the next video, we'll be talking about types of vertebra. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next video.